Software development is changing at a very, very rapid pace. So today, I want to take a few minutes to take you through some ideas, some techniques, give you some tricks on how you can improve your work as a software developer and how you can keep up with AI. First, let me tell you the way I see AI helping developers. There are two groups. The first group is when you use AI as a copilot. And most of the people that I've been working with, most of the people that I've met, this is what they're doing, where they are driving, they are writing most of the code, they are leading, and then they're using AI to help with their work. They use AI as a copilot. Now, more and more, right now that we have tools like Codex, OpenAI Codex, or Anthropic Claude Code, more and more people, developers, are transitioning to serve as the copilot to AI, where they are letting AI drive. They're letting AI take the lead, and they are stepping back and helping AI do the job. And these tricks here, this mental shift, is what I want to cover today. Going from using AI as a copilot to an AI-first development workflow requires a fundamental mental shift. You cannot just expect this to just happen. You have to acquire the skills that are going to help you make this transition. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to propose, if you're starting out, a 7-step workflow. This is the workflow that I use when building together with AI, when letting AI lead. Planning is the first step here. You need to know what you're building before you start. And before you even think about AI, you have to understand the area, the moment, the time where AI will help you and where AI might not be that useful. So for example, whenever you're creating boilerplate or scaffolding, AI is great for that. Obviously, repetitive transformations, when you're creating, or when you're building a prototype, when you're generating test cases, creating and reviewing documentation, refactoring, all of those are opportunities for you to use AI to help you. However, there are many times where AI might not be that helpful. If you're working with logic that's not properly documented or is too complex, when you're working with security critical code, when you're doing performance optimizations, when you're debugging bugs that are very subtle, very hard to find, AI might not work as well. Now, assuming that you have gotten into an area where you can actually use AI, I want you to start shifting from imperative prompting to declarative prompting. So here is the idea. So far, people have been using AI by asking models exactly what they need to do. So basically, you instruct the model, hey, create a page, add these components to that page, make it work this way. And I want you to start transitioning to telling AI what you want to accomplish, what your goals are. That is declarative prompting. This is an incredible, important shift, especially now with the current generation of models. The latest models from Anthropic, the latest set of open source models like Minimax, the latest version of DeepSeek, Kimi. These models are every day more capable of taking our requests and interpreting those requests and creating their own solutions. I don't want you to be that solution oriented. Instead, focus more in goals. So another trick here is for you to start combining exploratory sessions with upfront planning. Upfront planning is still very important. If you want to unlock longer sessions with AI, where you sit down, you give a bunch of instructions, and you can just leave and let AI do stuff, upfront planning is very important. You're gonna have to provide a lot of requirements, but that is not the only way to write code. You should combine upfront planning with exploratory sessions where you do not give that many details. Instead, you let AI figure things out. And the reason this is so important, the reason this is so helpful, is because AI will start surprising you. AI will start finding solutions that maybe you didn't think about. So it is a good idea to have, for example, 2 sessions where you're doing something here that you know exactly how it needs to happen. So you did some upfront planning, and something here where you're just exploring. And you can throw that away if it doesn't work. You can use GitHub Worktrees, for example. So if it doesn't work, you throw it away, but AI will start surprising you. Upfront planning requires you to front load your thinking. So you're gonna be putting effort into creating, into speccing out everything that you need AI to do. The idea here is for you to break down the problem, define what done looks like, exactly what you want to accomplish, what your goals are, and you're gonna try to document constraints and edge cases to show AI what it needs to do and the things that it should not be doing. The more clarity and context you provide up front, the better the agent will be able to execute that autonomously. The autonomous word here is super important because that's where leverage exists. Whenever you can just basically give something to the agent and unlock a very long session of coding. You don't want to constantly be going back and forth. That's gonna slow you down. So the more you can provide up front, the better chance you have for the agent to have a long session. You want to reduce the back and forth. Here is a tip for those of you who use Claude Code. And these tips, even though I'm focusing them on Claude Code because that's what I'm using, most of these tips are going to work with Cursor, with the agent from Cursor, or with Codex. Ask Claude Code to specify in your Claude.md before writing any code, describe the approach and wait for approval. So if you are the type of person who really likes to ensure you're doing enough upfront planning, make sure Claude does not write a lot of code without asking for your approval. After planning, we get into breaking things down. Very, very important, very related with planning. I want you to start breaking the work you give to these agents into single responsibility tasks. Basically, one trick. If whatever you're telling the agent contains the word and, you're probably asking for too much. So break that down. If you find your agent struggling, probably your scope is too big. You need to ask the agent to break down whatever request you gave it into individual features or into individual smaller tasks that the agent can tackle in a better way. From my experience, the more contained these tasks are, the smaller they are, the more focused they are, the better quality is gonna come out of this model, the better chance you're gonna have of getting good results. Here is another tip for those of you using Claude Code. Write down in Claude.md if a task requires changes in more than 3 files, breaking down into smaller tasks first. So it's kind of like giving it a clue that you don't want to make changes that affect too much in your code. Instead, you want to sort of like get smaller changes one at a time. This is gonna help Claude realize that this might be a big change. So before making it, I actually need to break it down into smaller tasks. Another idea is to create a decompose command. If you're using Claude Code, you can create skills, you can create commands as well, /commands. So create a decompose command where you can just provide your plan. Very, very simple for you to do this quickly. The decompose command, the description of the command is gonna tell Claude to break things down, break it into single responsibility tasks. So you can quickly say decompose, and this is the feature that I want to build, and Claude will give you back a plan composed of multiple single responsibility tasks, which is a great way, faster way of accomplishing this. Area number 3 of our plan is to be specific. It's just like having somebody working for you. The more specific you are, the better results you're gonna get. The more vague you are, the harder it's going to be for agentic tools to provide the results that you're looking for. So here is the anatomy, or the way I think about a good plan. How do I create a plan that my agentic tool understands? Okay, so I think about these 4 areas. You want to specify the what you want to accomplish. So for example, hey, write a function that receives 2 numbers and outputs the result of this certain formula. Now you need the how of the plan. The how will contain, like for example, the approach you want the agent to follow, unless this is an exploratory session or you're using declarative prompting where you're gonna let the agent figure it out. If you're gonna do upfront planning, you want to specify how exactly you want the agent to accomplish something. So for for example, hey, I want you to use recursion to solve this specific problem. You need the where, and basically this will give the agent the context in the code base that you want the agent to touch, which files you should be making changes to, which files you should never touch. And finally, you want the NAT, and the NAT is one of the most important things in a plan. You want to specify the areas, the things that are adjacent to your plan that you want your agent to ignore. Do not implement this. I do not care about doing that. That will give a lot of information to your agent. So anytime you're thinking about a plan and you want to be very specific, think about these 4 areas and make sure your plan contains all 4 of them. Another good trick is showing the agent what good looks like. And this comes from prompting. A couple of years ago when we started doing some prompt engineering, a good idea is to always show, as part of your prompt, examples of what you want to accomplish. So that still applies here. When you're trying to ask the agent to accomplish something, show the agent what good looks like. Give the agent examples of the format that you're expecting back, of the boundaries and dependencies. Give specific examples so the agent knows, has something to look at in order to produce a better result. Ask the agent to explain its approach. Something that happens is that these agents are going to make assumptions, because it doesn't matter how much time you spend creating a plan. It's usually very hard to specify everything, so there are going to be some assumptions. Just like people, these agents are going to make assumptions about things that you might need and how you might want them. So the agent is going to make some assumptions. Some of those assumptions are going to be great, and that's when you feel the magic from these agents. Sometimes these assumptions are going to be wrong, so ask the agent to explain those assumptions, and that way you can check whether the agent is doing something good or something that you really want to change. You can do this early on. A tip for Claude Code: always reference files directly. I've seen many people using Claude Code and they're vague in where the changes need to happen. Try to specify files directly. Instead of saying, change my sponsors that are in whatever section of my website, tell the agent, change my sponsors and reference the specific file, and that will reduce the number of mistakes considerably. Area number 4 of our plan is about context. And context here is everything. One of the most important areas of modern AI is context engineering, and how you put together a context that's everything the agent needs in order to do a good job. Same plan, same prompt will have completely different results, will give you different code depending on what your agent knows about your project, depending on the context. So make sure you always provide assumptions beforehand, or ask the agent to list any assumptions so you can correct them. Let the agent read your plan and say, I'm not sure if here you mean A or you mean B. And that will help you clarify and make or create better context for your agent. A tip for Claude Code: describe your tech stack, your folder structure, your coding conventions, and any anti-patterns you like to avoid in your Claude.md file. In fact, if you ask Claude to initialize your file, Claude will add this information based on what it's seen to your Claude.md file. And the reason this is important is because Claude does not have to do that thinking ever again. It can just read it from the file and reuse it on subsequent requests. If you don't add it, you're forcing Claude to recheck the folder structure every single time. There is a Claude command that they recently added that's called insights. And one of the things, if you run /insights in your Claude instance, Claude is going to generate a report where it's going to show you exactly areas where you can improve your prompting for Claude Code, your usage of Claude Code. And one of the areas consistently that I keep getting from different projects is improving the context I'm giving Claude in my Claude.md file. Another idea in this area is to use the memory to save any information you want to make persistent. So anytime you find something, any preferences that you want to reuse, just use the memory command and modify the memory file, add it there so Claude always has access to it. Another thing is to add a .claude ignore file. Anything that you don't want Claude to touch, add it here. It's very easy to get bogged down your Claude code, your agent, by constantly checking files that are temporary files or files that you really don't want Claude to process for some reason, security files, stuff like that. Just add them to the file. Claude will never read or modify those files. Now, from our plan, we go now to number 5. Remember, there are 7 steps. Number 5, one of the most important ones, the one that everyone is talking about, is review. Review mercilessly. Agents make mistakes. Period. It doesn't matter how much effort you put in all of the previous steps in order to reduce those mistakes, agents will still make mistakes. You have to review. Remember that AI-generated code might look good in isolation when you just look at it. When the code that comes back from Claude, that code might look perfect. But once you integrate it with the rest of the solution, that code might have unintended consequences, might cause problems in other areas of your system. Always verify your system as a whole. Don't rely on just checking the code that comes out of the agent. Focus on changes that are unrelated to the code and the comments that you're changing right now. Pay special attention to anything, any contracts from your system that potentially break because of modifications from the agent. Because it's very, very simple to get into a situation where Claude is fixing something, but at the same time is breaking something else that is hard to realize just by looking at the code that Claude is making. Breaking things down into smaller tasks will help a lot in this area because you are making sure that you're only working on a contained space. You're not letting Claude touch too many files at once. Here is something that helps me a lot, and this is a very good way that I found for me to keep my sanity and to keep ownership of my code base. Sometimes I write the test cases first, and then I ask my coding agent, in this case Claude Code, to implement the code that will make that test pass. I don't do this all the time, but anytime I want to make sure certain functionality is correct, this is what I do. I'm not gonna write the solution, I'm just gonna write a test case. And then I'm gonna let Claude figure out what code is gonna make past that test. And guess what? Sometimes Claude Code is gonna cheat. It's gonna find a solution that makes my test pass, but it's not a proper solution. I'm gonna write another test, so it fails again. And I'm gonna keep forcing Claude Code to find the proper solution to pass my test cases. I found that that way I get way stronger solutions by forcing Claude to do this. Write on your Claude.md. When there is a bug, start by writing a test case that reproduces that bug, and then write the code that makes that test case pass. Very good trick to make sure that Claude Code has some guidance, some guardrails on fixing bugs. The result of doing this is not only getting stronger code, but it's also getting a very, very strong test suite that you can keep running over and over again, and Claude Code can use to make future changes. Write a test case first to make the test pass. It's TDD for agentic coding. You can also write on your Claude.md, after writing the code, list what could break and suggest tests to cover it. I've seen many people do this already. They manually prompt the agent to write code or to propose test cases to solve problems that might occur. You can also codify this in your Claude.md, so Claude does this automatically. You can also create a review command. This is also something that I do on every of my projects. I create a review command that is gonna check my code for any mistakes, for any edge cases. It's gonna make sure my code is consistent with the rest of the patterns in my code base. I do this and I can just call that review command whenever. Very, very easy, and Claude is just gonna go through all of that process without me having to reprompt the agent all the time. I usually create a sub-agent, so I run that review as a sub-agent, so I keep my context clean from the results of this agent. Finally, create a test command. This is something very simple to do. Tell Claude how to run your test cases. That test command will basically spin off another sub-agent, and that will run all of your test cases. Using Claude Code over time, you can just tell Claude Code that it can run this command automatically whenever it makes a change, and then check the results. Then we get into the sixth step, which is iterate. And the point here of working with agents with agentic coding is precisely this loop that we create, where we have an agent writing the code, we have ourselves, we're copiloting here, reviewing that code, then we're giving the agent feedback, and the agent is rewriting that code by using that feedback. This is the iteration process that we're gonna be doing while working with these agents. Agents like to overcomplicate things. Many times I've asked my agent to write a solution that I think it should be very simple, and then I get code back that's way more complex than what I need. Sometimes the agent is checking for edge cases that are impossible to happen. So always challenge complex solutions that come back from these agents. Anytime you see code that you suspect it shouldn't be that complex, tell the agent that. And the agents are usually gonna come back with a much simpler, better solution for you. Write in your Claude.md file. When I say something is wrong, ask clarifying questions before rewriting. Something that you're gonna find if you're using these agents is that sometimes they give you a solution and it's not correct. The only thing that you do is, this is not correct. Then the agent is gonna try to re-implement that solution without necessarily knowing the assumptions that you're making or the reasons that you think the solution is not correct. So instead, I told my agent, anytime I say that something is wrong, just make sure you ask clarifying questions. So the answers to those are gonna help the agent make better decisions. That's how you iterate. Use the rewind command. Claude Code provides a rewind command where you can always go back whenever a solution provided by Claude is not correct. I ask it to do something, it doesn't work, and instead of keeping the context going or making changes on top of the changes, I don't want to do that. Instead, I tell Claude, just go back, rewind to before you made the solution or you created the code. Let me tell you some clarifying notes. Very easy to just move forward without mistakes. Minimize the time you wait by using Git Worktrees. Git Worktrees will help you have copies of your code base and run parallel agents. So something that I do is I have several terminals running Claude Code on my code base, but they are on different work trees. So the changes from one agent are not interfering with the changes from another agent. Here is another tip, and this is not for the faint of heart. Don't be afraid of running Claude by skipping permissions. Something that bothers me all the time is that Claude, obviously, every session is gonna ask you for permissions to do certain things. Don't be afraid, especially when you're running exploratory sessions, to run Claude using this command and skipping permissions. This is going to make it feel incredibly fast. And this is the final step of your plan, but I'm gonna argue is one of the most important ones. You need to teach your agents to do better next time. The real value here comes from compounding the knowledge of these agents over time. That's the real leverage of agentic coding. These tools are going to learn just like an intern would. Maybe not necessarily the same, but they can learn from the way you work and from mistakes that they make. But you need to make sure you are accumulating that knowledge appropriately so you can actually take advantage of that learning over time. Every iteration that you're using these agents, you're gonna be getting two outputs. The first output is the solution that the agent gave you, some code maybe, or some changes in the documentation. The second output that you're getting from the agent is reusable knowledge. That's one of the most important things that you can use. Here is how. Write in your Claude.md file. Every time I correct you, add a new rule to the Claude.md file so it never happens again. This also works if you are using a skill. So anytime I use a Claude skill and Claude makes a mistake, the first thing that I'm going to do after that session is over is asking Claude to update the skill with any new learnings from that session. And Claude can summarize the session, can realize the mistakes it made, and can go and correct the skills file so that mistake never happens again. And over time, you're gonna start plugging all of the holes of your skill. Over time, the agent will learn to do things better. That's the important part. Never fix the same mistake twice. Convert any successful, repeatable prompt into a workflow. Don't prompt your agent over and over and over again using the same process. Instead, anytime you're doing something and you find yourself asking for it over and over again, just create a skill. Automate that workflow so you don't have to repeat it again. Create a slash command or create a skill just to do that over and over again. Create sub-agents. I mentioned that I had a review sub-agent, I had a test sub-agent. So these sub-agents will work separately from the main context of your agent. So for example, for running all of the test cases, this is something repetitive that I do all the time. This is something that requires large context or specialized analysis. And therefore, I don't want to pollute my main context with all of the results from the test cases and from everything that the agent is doing. I'm going to create a sub-agent, very simple to do, and they're reusable. Agentic coding right now in 2026 is at the worst it will ever be. Even if we don't make any more progress, what we have right now is incredibly powerful. But keep in mind, it's at the worst it will ever be. So the sooner you start, the bigger your leverage gets as we improve the way these agents work. So hopefully you learned something today. Thank you for having me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.